Young Millionaire rented a cabin for Solitude. He never thought love would be next door. Beautiful love story. Nathan Reed slammed the cabin door behind him, exhaling deeply as he tossed his duffel bag onto the old creaky sofa. The silence was exactly what he needed. No board meetings, no persistent investors demanding answers, and no reporters invading his personal life, just pure, undisturbed peace. He had rented this secluded cabin deep in the Vermont mountains, far away from the chaos of his billion-dollar financial empire. Nathan wasn't running away. He never ran. But after relentless months of pressure and stress, he desperately needed a break to reset himself. Approaching the window, he gazed out at the snow-covered trees, gripping a steaming cup of coffee tightly in his hands. The serene, untouched landscape eased his troubled mind. Suddenly, his attention shifted. Outside, a woman bundled up in a thick winter coat and scarf was struggling with a large stack of firewood, the logs repeatedly slipping from her grasp. Her cabin was adjacent to his, still distant enough for privacy, but close enough for him to clearly see her difficulty. She stumbled again, causing logs to scatter across her porch. Nathan sighed, setting his coffee down. He hadn't come here to socialize, but seeing her struggle made it impossible to ignore. Without another thought, he grabbed his heavy jacket and stepped outside into the bitter cold. "Need some help?" he called out, his voice cutting through the crisp mountain air. She spun around, startled, her brown hair slightly disheveled beneath her knitted hat, eyes wide with surprise and wariness. She hesitated, clearly reluctant, before finally relenting. "Yes, please, that would be great." Nathan bent down swiftly, gathering the scattered logs with ease. As he stacked them by her door, she watched him curiously, brushing snow from her gloves. "You new here?" she asked softly, still cautious. Nathan nodded. "Rented the cabin next door for a few weeks." She smiled faintly. "Ah, the fancy one, figures." Nathan stepped outside the next morning, savoring the sharp bite of Vermont's crisp mountain air. The quiet was exactly what he'd envisioned until the rhythmic thud of an axe slicing through wood caught his attention. Turning his gaze toward the neighboring cabin, he saw Emily standing in the clearing, effortlessly splitting logs with graceful precision. Each strike resonated through the cold air, her breath forming delicate clouds around her face. Nathan leaned against the porch railing, unable to look away, captivated by the calm determination radiating from her petite frame. She paused suddenly, sensing his presence, and met his eyes with an amused smirk. "Enjoying the show?" she teased lightly, brushing strands of chestnut hair from her flushed cheeks. He chuckled, raising his coffee mug in acknowledgement. "Didn't take you for the lumberjack type." Emily laughed, a sound that warmed him more than the hot coffee in his hands. "Did you think firewood magically appeared on my doorstep?" Nathan shrugged playfully. "Wouldn't have surprised me." Shaking her head with a soft smile, she set the axe aside. "So, city guy, what brings you to our snowy paradise? You don't strike me as someone who enjoys isolation." He hesitated, unaccustomed to revealing anything personal specially to someone he barely knew. Yet there was something disarming about her, something that invited honesty. "Needed a break from my life," he finally admitted, his voice quieter than intended. Emily studied him, her hazel eyes probing gently. "Must be some life if you're willing to brave these mountains in winter just to escape it." Nathan's jaw tightened, the weight of his chaotic world pressing down once more. "You could say that," he murmured. Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Well, if you ever tire of frozen dinners, I cook every night." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Are you inviting me to dinner?" She smiled, eyes twinkling mischievously. "Let's just say if you knock on my door, I won't turn you away." With that, Emily picked up the axe again, leaving Nathan standing there, his heart pounding as he realized this woman, and her simple invitation, had just sparked something in him that no business deal ever could. That evening, Nathan found himself standing on Emily's porch, his hand hesitating momentarily before knocking gently on her cabin door. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd come. Maybe it was the enticing aroma of something home-cooked drifting through the chilly night air, or perhaps it was the restless energy that had gnawed at him since their morning conversation. When Emily opened the door, her eyes widened briefly in surprise, quickly softening into amused warmth. "I honestly didn't think you'd show," she said, stepping aside to invite him in. Nathan shrugged, smiling softly. "Figured I'd take you up on that offer." Inside, the cabin enveloped him in cozy warmth. The glow from the fireplace cast golden shadows across walls, adorned with photos, books, and well-loved quilts, a sharp contrast to his own sterile, impersonal retreat next door. Emily moved with effortless grace around the kitchen, ladling hearty stew into 2 bowls before placing them on the small wooden table. Nathan watched her carefully, fascinated by how comfortable and at peace she seemed in her world. "Do you live out here alone?" he finally asked, curiosity winning out. Emily took a seat across from him, nodding slightly. "Yes, for almost 3 years now." Nathan stirred his spoon thoughtfully through the stew. "Why?" he asked, genuinely interested. She exhaled slowly, a gentle smile touching her lips. "For the same reason you're here, I guess. I needed a break from everything." Nathan understood that sentiment deeply, perhaps more than he cared to admit. They ate quietly for a moment, the silence comforting rather than awkward. Finally, Emily spoke up again, her tone gentle. "So, what do you do when you're not hiding in the mountains?" Nathan hesitated. He rarely discussed his work, especially with someone who didn't already know who he was. "I run a company," he replied vaguely, carefully gauging her reaction. She raised an eyebrow, her expression teasing. "That's not much of an answer." Nathan chuckled softly, realizing how easy it was to talk to her. "It's an answer, just not detailed." She studied him, amused. "Fair enough. Though you don't seem like the typical corporate type." Nathan leaned back, intrigued. "And what type do I seem like?" Emily pretended to ponder, tapping her chin lightly. "Brooding, mysterious, probably terrible at relaxing." Nathan laughed. A genuine, unexpected sound. "Not bad," he admitted, feeling something within him loosen. They fell into effortless conversation, sharing stories and laughter as hours slipped by unnoticed. It had been a long time since Nathan had simply enjoyed someone's company without hidden agendas or expectations. Emily wasn't trying to impress him or get something out of him, she was simply herself. When it grew late, Nathan reluctantly rose to leave. Emily walked him to the door, pausing before opening it. "You know, for someone who came here seeking solitude, you're pretty terrible at staying away," she teased gently. Nathan smirked, suddenly serious. "Maybe solitude isn't what I need after all." Emily's eyes flickered with quiet understanding, and she gave him a soft, genuine smile. "Good night, Nathan," she whispered. As he stepped out into the cold mountain night, Nathan realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't consumed by thoughts of work, deadlines, or the pressures awaiting him back home. Instead, he found himself thinking about Emily, the warmth of her laughter, and the surprising ease of their newfound friendship. It was an unexpected, comforting revelation and one he was eager to explore further. Over the next several days, the quiet companionship between Ethan and Sarah deepened naturally, forged through the simplicity of shared moments and gentle understanding. Each morning, Ethan found himself stepping onto the porch with a cup of coffee, eager for that familiar sight of Sarah gathering firewood, wrapped snugly in her woolen scarf, cheeks rosy from the crisp mountain air. They began sharing breakfast simple meals of toast and eggs, always accompanied by conversations that wandered easily from memories of their pasts to dreams neither had dared to speak aloud in years. Ethan, the powerful CEO who had spent his life chasing success, discovered that with Sarah, he could talk about his childhood, his regrets, and even his fears without feeling weak or exposed. Sarah, who had built a quiet life of independence and solitude, found herself opening up about the weight of expectations she had carried for so long, and the suffocating life she had left behind. Ethan understood her struggles deeply. He knew what it felt like to live under the watchful eyes of others, forever feeling the pressure to measure up. That shared understanding was their quiet bond, growing stronger with each passing day. The connection between them was gentle yet profound, rooted in mutual empathy. When Ethan spoke of the relentless demands of his corporate life board meetings, the pressure from investors, and the incessant intrusion into his personal affairs, Sarah listened not with pity, but with genuine understanding. Likewise, when Sarah talked about the engagement she had broken off, the future she had abandoned because it was someone else's dream, Ethan felt her pain as if it were his own. They began taking long walks through the snow-dusted forest, the tranquility of nature enveloping them as their conversations flowed effortlessly. One afternoon, as they stood overlooking a valley blanketed in pristine white, Sarah admitted quietly, "You know, I came out here to be alone, to figure myself out. But I didn't realize how lonely that could feel. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the way her eyes shone with unshed tears. He reached out instinctively, gently placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I thought solitude would fix everything, he confessed softly. But meeting you made me realize I wasn't looking for isolation, I was looking for understanding. Sarah smiled softly, the warmth in her expression melting away the lingering tension in his chest. In that moment, standing side by side amid the vast silence of the mountains, they both realized something had shifted irreversibly between them. Their bond wasn't built on grand declarations or promises. Instead, it was woven from quiet confessions, shared laughter, and the mutual acknowledgement that they had found something rare, someone who truly saw them. Each evening, as the fire crackled softly in Sarah's cozy cabin, they would sit together, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes speaking in hushed tones about hopes and fears, always feeling a profound sense of peace in each other's presence. Ethan found himself looking forward to these quiet moments more than anything he had ever achieved in his career. Sarah, too, found herself hoping each morning that she'd see him step onto his porch, eyes searching for her in the gentle morning light. They hadn't expected to form such a deep connection, yet day by day, conversation by conversation, they did, each realizing that perhaps they weren't running from life, but finally running toward something meaningful. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Sarah found themselves drawn closer by a connection neither had anticipated. What began as a simple friendship born from quiet conversations and shared solitude had blossomed into something deeper, more profound. Each interaction, each shared glance, carried a quiet intensity and unspoken awareness that their bond was shifting, transforming into a feeling neither could deny. Ethan, who had once craved isolation, found himself seeking Sarah's company more and more, captivated by her easy laughter and the gentle strength that seemed to radiate from her very being. He no longer counted the days since he'd arrived at the mountain cabin. Instead, he measured time in moments with her, the scent of freshly brewed tea in the morning, the soft smile that greeted him whenever they crossed paths, the comfort of evenings spent by the fireplace, talking or simply enjoying the silence together. These moments felt precious, stolen from lives they had both left behind, yet somehow more real and more meaningful than anything else he had ever experienced. For Sarah, whose life had been built around self-reliance and guarded independence, the feelings stirring within her heart were both exhilarating and terrifying. Ethan had come into her world unexpectedly, breaking through walls she had carefully constructed around herself. At first, she resisted, reminding herself that she had come here to escape attachments, not create new ones. But with every passing day, Ethan's presence became something she couldn't ignore, like a gentle breeze that slowly wore away at her defenses, leaving her vulnerable but strangely free. She noticed how he watched her, not with judgment or expectation, but with genuine curiosity and warmth. It made her feel seen in a way she never had before, making it impossible to resist the pull toward him. Their feelings came to the surface one snowy evening, as the world outside was blanketed in white, creating a cocoon of warmth and intimacy inside Sarah's cabin. They had just finished dinner and were sitting near the fire, the room filled with a soft golden glow. Ethan's arm rested casually along the back of the couch, his fingers occasionally brushing Sarah's shoulder in a gentle, almost subconscious gesture. The contact sent a pleasant warmth radiating through her, making her heartbeat quicken. The quiet between them was comfortable, but beneath it ran a charged undercurrent, a silent acknowledgement that something was changing. It was Sarah who finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, did you ever think it would be like this?" He turned to face her, his eyes soft but searching. "Like what?" he asked gently. "This," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "Us. Did you think when you came here that you'd find someone?" Ethan exhaled slowly, carefully choosing his words. "I didn't even know what I was looking for when I came here," he admitted. "I just knew I was missing something in my life. I thought it was peace, maybe solitude. But now," he paused, his voice growing thick with emotion, "now I realize it was you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat, the raw honesty in his words touching her deeply. "I'm scared, Ethan," she confessed, her voice trembling slightly. "Scared of getting too close, scared of what happens when you leave, scared that I've let myself feel things I promised I wouldn't again." Ethan moved closer, gently taking her hand in his. His touch, reassuring and steady. "I'm scared too," he whispered. "But for the first time, I'm more afraid of losing youth than anything else. I didn't come here expecting to find love, but now that I have, it feels impossible to imagine life without it." Their eyes locked, unspoken words passing between them. In that moment, something shifted, and their lips met softly in a tender, lingering kiss that felt like the first promise of something real. It was hesitant at first, filled with uncertainty, but quickly deepened into a slow, searching embrace, a declaration of feelings they had both struggled to express. As they pulled apart, Sarah rested her forehead against his, eyes closed, savoring the newfound closeness. "I never thought I'd let myself feel this again," she whispered. Ethan gently cupped her face, tilting her chin up so their eyes met again. "Maybe this is exactly what we both needed," he murmured. Maybe finding each other wasn't an accident, but exactly what was supposed to happen. In that quiet cabin, surrounded by the snowy tranquility of the mountains, Ethan and Sarah allowed themselves to believe in the possibility of a new beginning, one filled not with loneliness or escape, but with the quiet, undeniable beauty of love. As their connection deepened, Ethan and Sarah both faced an internal battle with fears they'd long kept buried. One evening, as snow gently tapped against the windows, they sat in Sarah's cozy cabin, the fire casting soft, flickering shadows on the walls. Ethan noticed the quiet tension in Sarah's eyes and gently reached for her hand. "Tell me what you're thinking," he urged softly. Sarah hesitated, then spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "I'm afraid, Ethan. I spent years building a life that didn't depend on anyone else, convinced that relying on others meant setting myself up for disappointment. Now, with you, I'm scared of losing that independence, of being vulnerable again." Ethan's grip tightened reassuringly around her fingers. "I'm scared too," he admitted quietly. "Scared that I'll go back to a life that feels empty without you, and scared that I'm just running from one problem into another. But mostly, I'm afraid of missing out on something real because I'm too worried about what could go wrong." Sarah's eyes searched his, seeing her own fears mirrored back. "What if this is just temporary? What if we let ourselves fall, only to end up hurt?" Ethan took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Maybe we will get hurt. But what if we don't? What if, by facing that fear together, we find something even better than we imagined?" Sarah's breathing grew shaky, vulnerability washing over her face. Ethan gently cupped her cheek, making her look into his eyes. "I don't have all the answers, Sarah. But I do know that I'd rather risk the pain than spend my life wondering what might have been." She exhaled slowly, letting his words sink in. The fire crackled softly, and in that moment, Sarah made a choice, leaning forward and resting her head against his chest. "Maybe it's time we both stopped running from fear," she whispered, "and started running toward something that matters." Ethan gently tilted Sarah's chin upward, their eyes meeting in a deep, unwavering gaze. The quiet storm of emotions swirling between them made the warmth of the cabin feel even more intimate. "Maybe it's time we stopped letting fear dictate our lives," Ethan murmured softly. "We've both been running for so long from expectations, from past mistakes, from futures that didn't feel right. But here, right now, it feels like we've found something worth staying for." Sarah's heart fluttered wildly, her pulse racing as she searched his face, looking for any hint of doubt. But all she saw was sincerity, a quiet determination that mirrored her own longing. She took a steadying breath, feeling the weight of their decision settle into place. "I don't know if I'm ready to promise forever, Ethan," she whispered honestly, her voice trembling slightly. "But I do know that, for the first time in a very long time, the present feels like enough." Ethan's lips curved into a tender smile, his thumb brushing gently across her cheek. "I'm not asking for forever," he assured her softly. "I'm just asking you to trust this momento, trust us. Let's choose now and let tomorrow take care of itself." Relief washed over Sarah, mingled with the sweet ache of vulnerability. She knew that in choosing to embrace the present with Ethan, she was risking her carefully constructed independence. Yet the thought of losing him, of losing the quiet comfort they'd found, felt far more terrifying than any uncertainty the future could hold. With a small nod, she whispered, "Okay." Ethan leaned forward, pressing his forehead gently against hers, their breath mingling in the quiet space between them. For a moment, time seemed to slow. There was nothing beyond the warmth of their closeness, the quiet crackling of the fire, and the gentle hum of falling snow outside. They were two souls who had wandered far, only to find solace in each other's arms. Days slipped by in a peaceful haze of shared meals, long conversations, and simple, unhurried moments. Waking up next to Sarah felt like discovering a part of himself he hadn't known was missing. Every quiet laugh, every gentle touch deepened the bond forming between them. Ethan no longer counted down the days until he would return to his previous life, the thought of leaving becoming more distant with every passing hour. Instead, he allowed himself to immerse fully in the here and now, cherishing the small joys he'd once overlooked. Sarah, too, felt the change, a quiet confidence growing within her, rooted in the simple yet profound choice to live fully in the present. With Ethan, she discovered that vulnerability didn't weaken her, it strengthened her, freeing her from the confines of her own walls. They had both come here searching for solitude, but in each other they found something far richer. A deep, abiding connection that required no grand promises or elaborate plans, just the courage to embrace each moment as it came. One evening, as they sat together on the cabin's porch, watching the sun set behind the snow-capped mountains, Ethan slipped his hand into Sarah's, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Do you ever wonder what happens next?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with curiosity rather than fear. Sarah smiled softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon, painted in hues of gold and lavender. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I remind myself that this moment, right here, is enough. Maybe the future will bring challenges, but for now, I just want to savor this." Ethan squeezed her hand gently, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over him. "Me too," he murmured, his voice filled with quiet certainty. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together. But tonight, let's just live for now." In the quiet of the mountains, beneath the vast, endless sky, they chose each other not for the promise of forever, but for the quiet, perfect certainty of the present. As days melted into weeks, Ethan often found himself contemplating the uncertain road ahead. The thought of returning to the relentless demands of his former life, the endless meetings, constant pressures, and superficial relationships filled him with dread. Yet, the idea of staying here indefinitely, in this quiet refuge with Sarah, felt both comforting and daunting. Could he truly abandon the empire he'd spent years building? And if he did, what kind of life would they create together away from everything familiar? He knew he needed to address these questions eventually, but every time he looked into Sarah's eyes, he felt a certainty that transcended doubts and fears. She made him question everything he once valued: success, wealth, power, revealing their hollowness when measured against genuine connection and simple joys. Sarah, too, sensed Ethan's inner turmoil. Though she cherished their quiet companionship, she knew the outside world still called to him. Each time she watched him gaze thoughtfully at the mountains, she wondered if he would one day feel trapped by the simplicity she treasured. Yet, despite these fears, she couldn't deny the profound happiness he brought her, making her hope that perhaps their bond could withstand any storm that lay ahead. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Sarah finally voiced the question that had lingered unspoken between them. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" she asked softly. Ethan exhaled slowly, meeting her searching gaze. "I do," he admitted. "But every time I try to imagine leaving, I realize that nothing out there means as much as what we found here." Sarah felt her heart tighten with emotion, understanding the weight of his words. They both knew the future was uncertain, yet in that moment, it didn't matter. All they had was no and for Ethan. For the first time, it felt like more than enough. Ethan held Sarah's hands gently, feeling the warmth and sincerity radiating from her touch. He had spent years chasing what society deemed success, wealth, influence, and prestige, only to realize how hollow those achievements felt compared to the genuine happiness he experienced here with her. "I don't want to go back to a life that feels empty," he whispered softly. "Everything I thought mattered doesn't hold a candle to how I feel when I'm with you." Sarah's eyes glistened, her expression vulnerable yet hopeful. "Then stay," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In that quiet exchange, Ethan finally understood that true happiness wasn't found in boardrooms or high-stakes deals, but in simple, honest moments shared with someone who saw him for who he truly was. With a resolute nod, he embraced her tightly, knowing that choosing Sarah meant choosing a life filled with meaning and authenticity. For once, he felt completely at peace. The story of Ethan and Sarah carries a profound message about the importance of choosing authenticity and genuine happiness over material success and societal expectations. Ethan, a powerful CEO, initially believed that fulfillment came from wealth, influence, and prestige. However, through his unexpected connection with Sarah, he learned that true happiness lies not in external achievements but in simple, heartfelt connections. Many of us can relate to Ethan's journey. We chase after goals dictated by society, often neglecting our emotional well-being and inner desires. Sarah's presence served as a reminder that true contentment comes from relationships built on honesty, empathy, and mutual understanding. The lesson here is to pause and reflect. Are we genuinely happy, or are we merely following a path set by others? Like Ethan, it's essential to recognize when our achievements leave us feeling empty and be brave enough to pursue what truly fulfills us, even if it means stepping away from familiar comforts. Life's most valuable treasures are often intangible peace of mind, love, and the freedom to be our authentic selves. Embracing this truth requires courage, as it means choosing vulnerability over security and authenticity over approval. Ultimately, Ethan and Sarah's story encourages us to reevaluate our priorities, reminding us that life is fleeting, and true happiness is found in living a life aligned with our genuine selves. The key takeaway is clear. Never be afraid to follow your heart, for it leads to a life far richer than any wealth or status could ever provide.